Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. Score one for whistleblowers, journalism, and the vaunted Boston Globe Spotlight team. The report in the Globe a week ago today on issues at the VA Medical Center in Manchester resulted in the removal of that facility's director and chief of staff in a matter of hours after publication. At the heart of their story, whistleblower doctors unwilling to remain silent in the face of healthcare deficiencies and allegations of negligence. Joining us today, one of those whistleblowers, Dr. William Ed Kois, and the attorney representing these doctors, Andrea Amadeo Vickery of Manchester. Thank you for joining us, both of you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kois, for starters, this was something you were wrestling with for a long time behind the scenes. What prompted you to come forward and essentially blow the whistle?
I think the issue is that for many years, starting in 2012 when we started to identify the problem, we tried to work through the system. We tried to work it up through to my supervisor and then to the chief of staff. Our initial chief of staff was great, Andrew Bruder, and he was very helpful in trying to provide solutions. But after he left, then it became increasingly more difficult. And we took it all the way up to the head of the VISN. Dr. O'Hablam had been particularly instrumental in sending a note over his concerns that many of these patients were becoming very disabled when they could have been prevented. I sent that letter up through the channels of the VISN. It went to George Fuller. We later heard that the head of the VISN was not happy with the letter. And within a week or two, we had an intern, a young intern, who was a business intern, come in and start to view a couple charts. He viewed maybe 5 charts with me, but then graduated. And so after that, the VISN played no real role in it. And as we saw more and more patients have problems, and we started to talk to more and more physicians that were having difficulties, we realized that we were really in a bad situation where some people were getting hurt. I want to make clear that many excellent doctors are at our facility, and I think in many ways we provide excellent care for our patients. However, in selected areas we were very deficient, and we were seeing patients that were really having significant medical problems because of our inefficiency to deliver care.
And Andrea, as these doctors come forward to your office, what's your reaction as you start to hear from more and more of them and what they're describing?
My reaction was I was incredulous. I couldn't believe that a facility that is geared toward serving our veterans, those who served us, was so poorly managed, and the care that they received was not as good as one would expect. I was amazed when I read Dr. O'Hablam's letter about the myelopathy issue with many of the veterans, over 90 of them. And myelopathy was an issue that was eradicated 20 years ago in the private sector with the advent of MRI machines. What was happening in Manchester was a disconnect between these veterans with spinal cord, upper spinal cord problems, and follow-up. They would see a PCP in Manchester and be referred to a neurosurgeon in the Boston facility. And if they were not a surgical candidate at that time, this neurosurgeon would just send them back to Manchester. Unfortunately, when they came back to Manchester, there was no follow-up care. And so their spinal stenosis was allowed to progress and progress year after year until it got to the point where these veterans needed adaptive equipment, assisting like canes, crutches, wheelchairs. Whereas if they had been properly tested and scanned, the PCP would have known that the disease was progressing and sent them back to the neurosurgeon. That's the disconnect.
And Dr. Kois, this advanced cervical myelopathy, you were seeing patients who hadn't had an MRI in some time, and you were horrified.
Right. I had a gentleman that was chronicled in the Globe who had a spinal cord tumor resected in 1995. And in the notes, there seems to be an indication that they only got part of it. This tumor also regrows between 10 to 15% of the time, just normally. And there was no scan from 1995 until I saw him in approximately 2015. During that period of time, he went from completely ambulatory. They traveled around the world. They had a passport full of stickers. He built his house, and he built a lot of the inside part of his house. He went from that situation to being in a wheelchair and wearing Depends because he was incontinent of bowel and bladder. It was just a tragedy as far as I could see.
Yeah. And Andrew, you take these concerns to the federal delegation. September-ish of last year, there are some letters that go out. Were you satisfied with the response that came back from our elected officials?
I was. It took me a little while to understand the process. When the doctors came to me at first in the spring of 2016, their goal was to remain anonymous because of retaliation, and I, as experienced in this realm of employment law, knew that a whistleblower could be retaliated against and fired, and the legal process would take a year or more to catch up and get them a remedy. So I wanted to avoid that. They were anonymous, and that in a way handcuffed our congressional delegation because they were trying to go to the administration but not reveal the identity. So eventually I came up with the idea of writing a letter to them detailing it, and then the delegation passed that letter on to the appropriate federal agencies to investigate. And that's how we wound up with the Office of Special Counsel, which is the only independent agency involved in this investigation. We filed our Form 11s, which are the technical forms required to start a whistleblower action in September and October. I mean, when the congressional delegation passed on my letter, immediately it got the action we needed. Unfortunately, everything takes time. So the Office of Special Counsel reviewed all our complaints, interviewed our whistleblowers, and then put together their referral to the VHA, which is the Veterans Health Association. They found probable cause and gave it to the Office of Medical Inspector to investigate our charges. That's where the real delay came in. That took 6 months for them.
Yeah. And Dr. Kois, this has to have been a little bit of a surreal last week here as the report comes out and then investigators come back in. What's going on right now at the VAMC in Manchester?
First of all, let me say one important thing. I think that a large amount of credit goes to the free press. And I know you guys have been getting slagged down lately, but if it wasn't for the free press, and I'm talking the Boston Globe, I'm talking you, I'm talking local newspapers, I don't think this story would be on people's tongues. But right now it is. I every day have veterans come up and shake my hand and thank me. I get hugs from a lot of people in the elevators. I got a free coffee. People are energized by this issue. And the important point I also want to make is it's not just me or a couple of us. There were 11 physicians and or healthcare providers who were federal whistleblowers, but there was numerous others that talked to the Globe and were interviewed. And we could have had probably most of the physicians, except for the fact that there's an overwhelming fear among a provider as they step forward of the retaliation issue. Now, in the last week, I've been doing interviews. Last night I sat in again for a long interview with the Office of Medical Investigation. I was hoping that would go more positive. I'm not sure how it went. It's tough when you have an agency investigating itself. And so one of the things that we'd like to do is call for an independent investigation. Another thing that we'd like to call for is that the investigation extend beyond just looking at medical records, because as found in the investigation, the medical records have been tainted, and there are inaccuracies that have been admitted to by the OMI in which actually records were falsified. They were fabricated and cut and pasted over a series of years, but it's those records they're relying on to review. So I've suggested that as part of the independent review, that the patients actually be interviewed, and that in addition to the history, that they be examined, which I feel is really important, and that also logs of the equipment needed be obtained, so that people can see how patients went from maybe a cane to crutches to a walker to a wheelchair to an electric wheelchair to diapers over a period of time. And that's the great tragedy, is that we could have stopped some of this or prevented it.
And Andrea, you know, of course you guys would like to see action happen, but we've seen this with the VA before. Is there any concern that this is sort of this blows up and then we will, I guess, they'll be stretch it out and then nothing will happen?
Yes, there's a large concern that that will happen. It's already started. As I've expressed to Amy Covino and to you on previous broadcasts, we are very concerned that another whitewash is going to occur with this new committee that the VA has put together, this new OMI, Office of Medical Inspector. Dr. Kois and several other doctors met with these new investigators just last night and ran into the exact same issues with bias and confrontation and accusing the doctors of not doing what they should do, instead of focusing on the legitimate complaints. So we don't think anything different is going to come out of this new investigation. Why? Because the OMI is part of the VA agency. We need an independent investigation. And I noted that Undersecretary Young mentioned that he would have independent doctors and medical providers do an investigation. That's good, but we don't need the OMI too. We need more third-party involvement.
One of the interesting things about my meeting last night was they brought up the initial investigation that they did. Now, this is an investigation that the Office of Special Counsel is pushing strongly back because they feel it's insufficient. But out of the 96 patients that I brought forward, only 2 actually had a written critique of their care. They said that they looked at the other 94. However, they also said that they found nothing wrong. I did bring up to them at that point that I had a patient who had a screw put through the nerve, and that's wrong. That's not a normal thing, and yet they considered that to be fine. I also brought up the fact that I had a guy with a spinal cord tumor that regrew over 20 years without a MRI. Again, one of the patients that they said had no harm done. Yeah. And I think that, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that were hurt. And we're just trying to improve the care for the patients. We're not trying to say we provide across the board bad care or the doctors are bad. We're trying to get better care, and the stumbling point isn't the physician, it's the administration. When I gave a conference to bring this to light, I had no questions or follow-ups of how we can help. And that to me was you know, mind-blowing.
All right, well, it's an amazing story, and we promise to stay on it, and certainly you guys will continue to be the watchers on the wall there in terms of staying on the VA. So thank you so much for your time, Attorney Amadeo Vickery and Dr. Kois. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And